Hey everybody, Heather here with Wellness Within Counseling. So today we're going to talk about control versus no control, or in other words, what do you have control of versus what do you not have control of. If you haven't already seen my therapeutic exercise blog on my website, www.wellness-within.org, the 555 rule. If you haven't read that already, I encourage you to use that in connection with today's topic because the two actually go together really well. So the 555 rule, just as a reminder, says if it isn't going to matter 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 months from now, then don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. And the reason why that connects really well with what we have control over versus what we don't have control over is because if we're going to worry about something, we need to make sure that it's something that we can actually do something about. Because if you're going to worry about something you can't actually change, then it's kind of living in your head rent free. And like we always say, if it's not serving you, then it's costing you, right? It's costing you your peace, your sanity, your whatever. So when you use the 555 rule, you're going to ask yourself, is this going to matter to me in the future? And you can start by asking yourself, do I have control over it? That's how you can figure out if it's going to matter in the future. Because if I don't have control over it, then it's probably really not going to matter. So I put a few things up here and we're going to go over this a little bit more in detail. But boundaries, okay, self-talk, people, weather, and stressors. All right, let's go to the next page. All right, what I can control. So normally if you were working with me, this would be a part that you would do on your own. So if you do want to try to do this on your own, which I do strongly encourage you to try to do, now would be a good time to pause the video, make a list of things that you know that you can control. Okay, so pause the video, give you a couple seconds there, and then I'm going to go ahead and move on. All right, so here's a list of things that you can control. You can control how you respond to stressors. So I put how I respond, right? The boundaries that I set with others, my own thoughts and behaviors, the environment that I put myself in, self-talk. Notice the underlying theme for all of these. How I respond to stressors, the boundaries I set with others, my own thoughts and behaviors, the environment I put myself in, and my self-talk. So if you're not gathering that theme here, the theme is that you can control yourself. All right. Continuing on, the media I consume, my willingness to try new things, my values and my beliefs, my goals and how I pursue them, asking and accepting help from others. Okay, we're going to stop right here. Okay, this is like a little light bulb moment. So some of you know that I spent quite a few years working with substance use folks. And I also worked at the same time with mental health because the two really are hand in hand usually. So I have always told people that the difference between them completing therapy successfully and moving on and using the skills on their own, or them coming back to see me in a year or two because they've run into another hardship, usually balances on this factor right here. If you are willing to ask for help, that's the first step, right? And that's usually the hardest step. Asking for help, but also being willing to accept the help. Okay? want to be cognizant of who you're asking and also, what advice you're taking. But all in all, if you're asking from a professional for help and you're willing to accept that help, that usually makes the difference on whether or not you're going to continue to struggle with the same challenge that you're having. All right, now we're going to flip that over and we're going to do things you can't control. So we've done things you can control, and now you're going to do things that you can't control. So if you are doing this activity on your own, pause the video, make your list, and then come back and see how your list compares to this one. All right, we're going to keep going. I can't control, where'd my mouse go? There he is. Other people's behaviors or reaction. Other people's, okay? You cannot control other people. Past experiences or trauma. We can't change the past, right? Genetics. You can't change your genetics. Unexpected life events or losses. Those kind of things are going to happen in life, right? You've heard me say, those of you that have worked with me, you've heard me say, pain in life is normal, but suffering is not. You're going to have unexpected life events and losses in life. You can't control time. Okay, as much as we'd like to, we can't control time. All right, continuing on. Emotions that arise spontaneously. So I want this, this is another little light bulb here, okay? I probably should start putting something there. Emotions that arise spontaneously. So people will argue with me and say, you can't control your feelings and emotions. You can to some degree, okay? So that's why I added the word spontaneously. Because your automatic thoughts, they can be manipulated so that they aren't the first thing that comes to mind. So like, let me give you an example. If a person has a tendency to think about suicide frequently whenever something goes wrong, that is a negative coping skill that they have developed, and it kind of becomes like an automatic thought. What we do in therapy is we learn to not have that be the go-to. That does not have to be the first thing that comes to your mind when you have a challenge or you have something that you're struggling with, okay? So we can manipulate that stuff and change it. It takes time and it takes effort, but it absolutely can be changed. Now, there are some things that are going to just pop up, if you see somebody drowning or something like that, you're going to have these really intense emotions that pop up, right? So that's a really extreme example, but I just want to emphasize those types of things aren't necessarily controlled, but they can be manipulated. I mean, if you see that every day, you're going to desensitize to that a little bit, right? So just want to make sure everybody kind of understands that. Other people's understanding of my mental health. You can't control that. It would be really nice if we could. It'd be really nice if everybody understood exactly what we were going through. But that is so unrealistic. They have not lived in your shoes. They have not walked in your shoes. And if everybody was like you, the world would be a boring place. We need everybody to have their own individual experiences. That's how we learn things from each other. That's how we make connections to one another, because we've had our own unique experiences. Even if they're very similar, they have a lot of their own characteristics, and we make connections with folks that way. Weather and illness. You can't control that. Not really. You can do things to prevent illness, but you can't always control it. Whether, okay, so some of you will get really technical and start talking about cloud seeding and all that, but just in general. And as a little side joke, when I would do this with my groups, and I would have one group doing things they could control, and then I would have one group doing things they couldn't control, I always added cats and dogs to the list. You can control a dog, right? You can train a dog to do lots of things, to go to the bathroom outside and all kinds of stuff. But a cat, you might as well forget it. You cannot control a cat. At least that's how it works with the cat and the dog in my house. Intrusive thoughts. Okay, so you can, again, this kind of comes back to that spontaneous there. You can control, you can manipulate this to make it much easier to deal with, but you're always going to have thoughts that pop up in your head that you're going to wish that you didn't have to some degree. I mean, that's your body's and your mind's way of alerting you to a potential danger. Now, related to trauma and things like that, that's where we work on that to make this much less common. But it is, you know, it doesn't have to be something that you suffer with, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What others think or feel about us. So you can't control, again, what other people think or feel. So if you haven't seen the pattern already, things you can control you. Things you can't control, you cannot control someone else. The need for medication or support. So I feel like this has to be on here, because otherwise, people tend to think that, you know, medication is not entirely necessary. And that in some cases that's right, but in other cases it's not. Some people, you know, need medication to function, and to live well and to live a quality of life. And the same goes for mental health as it does for physical health. So if you know, it's like if you're physically ill, you ask a doctor, a medical doctor, for support. You might ask for medication. It's the same with mental health. Mental health may even be more important because it's so elusive and can be hard to pinpoint. You really need a professional to help you map that out and figure out, you know, how to treat it best. So the need for medication and support. All right, if I can't control it, I'm going to apply the 5-5-5 rule. So again, if you haven't watched my video on that, please check that out. I'm only going to focus what I can control. I can focus on my response, not the trigger, right? So that's a very loaded sentence. Think about that. I can control and focus on my response, but I'm not going to focus on that trigger. So let's say, let me think of an example. Recently I was talking to someone about a breakup. And so whenever a breakup happens, we tend to focus on the other person, right? What are they doing right now? You know, are they missing me? You start going through all this kind of stuff. And that's what you don't want to do. You don't want to focus on that trigger. You want to focus on your response to it. So ask yourself, wonder what's causing me to feel this way. Maybe it's important to me that, you know, another person recognize if I'm feeling hurt, right? Okay. I can set boundaries to protect my peace. This one, again, another very loaded sentence, another topic all on its own. Sometimes we have to set limits with family, friends, whoever, just to protect ourselves. So if you are finding yourself in toxic relationships with either friends, family, coworkers, whatever it is okay to set a boundary to protect yourself. That's not you being mean. That's not you casting them out for the rest of your life. Try not to think of that in very long terms. Think of it as, I'm going to set this boundary with this person for this amount of time at least, so that I can just focus on myself and not focus on the challenges that this relationship brings to me. And we'll talk about that in another topic another day. I can let go of the illusion that control equals safety. So basically, just because you think you have control of the situation doesn't mean that nothing bad's going to happen. Especially if you're a person who has a lot of anxiety and you feel like you need to be able to control everything, you're going to find that things are still going to happen even if you think you have full control. That's just the nature of life. So rather than put yourself through the torment of trying to control everything and getting upset when you can't, you gotta just let some of that stuff go. Call that radical acceptance sometimes. Okay, so I give you this metaphor, this kind of analogy here, a tree and a storm. So you see the tree here, it's blowing in the wind, bending a little bit there to the right. If I can't control the wind, but it can't control the wind, so the tree, it can't control the wind, right? It can't control the weather, but it can deepen its roots, bend with grace, and still stand tall, right? So trees weather an awful lot of different types of weather, and they adapt accordingly. They do what they have to do to survive, and that's what you and I do. All right, and as usual, because I truly believe in order for these things to become healthy habits, you do have to do an activity to go along with it. So here's a journaling activity. Make a list of things that you can control, and then make a list of things you cannot control. You may have already done that. You may have some more ideas. So jot those down in your journal that you're keeping for this. Then for each can't control item, reframe it. And here's an example. I can't control my past, but I can choose how to heal from it. So again, I always say, whenever you have a negative, right, it doesn't matter what we're doing. Anytime there's a negative in the exercise, always counter it with the positive. Okay, never want to leave that out here to float on its own. It needs to have a counterweight to balance it. So I can't control my past, but I can choose how to heal from it. You can also do a reflection. What surprised you about what you can control? So does anything on your list of what you can control surprise you? How might this shift your energy or focus this week? So knowing what you know now about what you can and you can't control, how can that impact you this week? What did you learn, and how do you plan to use what you learned? What boundaries or self-care practices support you in your control zone? So again, what can you implement as a result of what you learned? And focus on that control zone, because if you can't control it, there's no point in staying super focused on it. All right, so that completes today's therapeutic exercise. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. Follow us at www.wellness-within.org. Find us on Facebook at Wellness Within Counseling. And everybody have a great day. Peace be with you.